of the people taking antidepressants aren't depressed. So then why are you on antidepressants? All right, welcome back to the party, everybody. Here is my co-host, Morty, and I am your host, Lutch, a.k.a. TheIndianJesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Let's party. You've heard so much about antidepressants and SSRIs and all of this stuff going on for years now, for years. I have a video here that is a talk from Dr. Mark Horwitz about the efficacy and should we really be giving these out like candy as we do. Let's jump into it.
Welcome to another episode of After School. My name is Mark Horwitz. I'm a trained psychiatrist and researcher, and today I'm going to be talking about common misconceptions that people have about depression and antidepressants.
And there's a lot.
Here we go. There are a number of myths about depression and antidepressants that are hard to dislodge. Most notable is the myth that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. If you ask people in Western countries, about 80 to 90% of them will say they believe this to be true. The chemical imbalance theory is the colloquial description of the hypothesis that depression is caused by low serotonin, a chemical transmitter in the brain.
They'll refer to serotonin as like the happy chemical. That's what it gets released in your brain that makes you feel happy.
This idea was first proposed by academics, but was propagated widely by drug companies as part of their marketing push for antidepressants that increase serotonin.
Surprise, surprise.
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, that are so familiar to us today. These drugs became blockbusters and one of the most widely used classes of drugs in the world. Most people still don't know that there is no evidence that depression is caused by low serotonin, and researchers no longer think this is true.
No evidence that depression is caused by low serotonin. No evidence.
When people stop antidepressants, they can often experience low mood, anxiety, and a host of other symptoms. They can often conclude, or are told by doctors, that they are experiencing a return of their underlying condition and therefore need to stay on these drugs, sometimes for life.
Sounds almost like a heroin addiction.
However, we now know that withdrawal symptoms from these drugs can look very similar to anxiety and depression and can be easily mistaken for them. So these symptoms are not a sign that people need to stay on the drug, but may indicate that they need to come off them more carefully and slowly. There has been new research in this field on hyperbolic tapering, a specific way of slowly reducing their dose and an advance over old-fashioned ways of tapering.
So if we look at this chart here, these are just the, how many days is going across and the dosage is going up. So typically, the blue line is what the yellow line is what the experts were saying, that within 22 days, you should go from 20 milligrams of whatever and just be done. Then there's tapering strips, like especially if you've ever been on Suboxone. That is a very typical way that you'll see these strips, and you can cut the strips up or rip them up, and so you see a lot of jaggedness here. It's not a super straight line, but you taper off. And now that they're saying that the hyperbolic is the way, do it more slowly and casually. So the flat line, wherever it's flat, that's where you're not changing the dose. So even with the tapering strips, you're constantly coming off of these drugs instead of allowing your body in the blue line to, you drop a little bit and then you maintain there. Then you drop a little bit more and you maintain there. You drop a little bit more and you maintain there. And doing that, according to Dr. Horwitz here, is way, way better. And as somebody who has been on hard drugs and have to come off dealing with withdrawal, I can guarantee you that this is the way to go.
That can help people to come off more safely. Before I talk much more about these ideas, I just want to say that many people feel that they have been helped by antidepressants, and I in no way want to take that away from them or shame them for taking them.
Yeah, despite the fact that, he just claimed that there's no evidence, the fact is, it does cause a chemical change in your body. And for some people, that chemical change is needed and necessary. What we're talking about here is the rate of which these drugs are prescribed, the rate at which people are getting these and staying on them for life. We were just talking about tapering off. A lot of times, there's no plan. There's no exit plan. You get on these drugs, and then that's it. Because the doctor's making money, because the company's making money, you're just a customer. You're not a patient, you're a customer.
That's the last thing I want to do. Because aside from being a psychiatric researcher and training psychiatrist, I myself have used antidepressants for 20 years, although I am now stopping them. So I am in the same boat as lots of other people. My major aim is that people are more informed about what these drugs can and can't do. One of the most common ways of treating mental health conditions, like anxiety and depression, has become prescribing antidepressants. In the past, antidepressants were reserved for severe conditions, going back about 25 years ago when they were given to about 3 in 100 people.
So 3 in 100 people, that's, that makes sense. That makes sense that a chemical imbalance that needs a drug like that to work long term, that makes a little bit more sense. What are the numbers looking like today?
Since then, rates of prescribing have been increasing every year in Western countries. And this trend only increased more sharply in America, especially during the pandemic. Across the world, there are at least 100 million people on antidepressants. According to the CDC, over 43 million Americans are on an antidepressant.
43. That is over 10% of the country. Over 10% of the country. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. But that just doesn't seem like it would be rational. That would be how people are born. You would expect a number much closer to what we saw in 1988.
Which is about 1 in 4 adults. Over 15 million Americans have been on the medication for more than 5 years. Rates are similar across the Western world, with about 1 in 6 to 1 in 8 adults using antidepressants in any given year in Europe, the UK, and Australia.
It's crazy.
We also know from studies that a lot of these drugs are prescribed to people who don't have approved indications for taking the medication. That is, between a third and a half of people on antidepressants currently have or never had an evidence-based reason to be on the drug.
This Time magazine thing here is a half of the people taking antidepressants aren't depressed. So then why are you on antidepressants? Again, you are not a patient. You are a customer.
The role that medication plays in depression and anxiety is contested in academic circles. There are 2 main ways of thinking about what psychiatric drugs do. And this is from the work of Joanna Moncrief, a professor of psychiatry.
Shout out to Joanna.
System in Britain.
Dr. Joanna.
One has been called the disease-centered model, which is borrowed from mainstream medicine. A good example would be antibiotics for a bacterial lung infection. The antibiotics target and kill the bacteria and so solve the underlying cause of the infection, relieving the symptoms of cough and cold.
So this is pretty standard. And this is how we understand, like you said, most medicine. There's an issue. You treat it with something. It solves the underlying cause, and the symptoms are relieved. Side note, please, somebody, let me know where the background music for this part, what movie have I seen it in or heard it in? I recognize it, and I can almost see the movie, but I can't place it. Please help me.
And for a long time, drugs like antidepressants have been marketed in just the same way. That in some way, antidepressants are reversing the process of depression, like antibiotics kill bacteria.
Some countries, or people in other countries, find it appalling that you're allowed to advertise these things on TV like it's a toy or something fun.
This way of thinking about antidepressants was tied into the story that most people believe about depression, that it is caused by a chemical imbalance or low serotonin. This idea was first conceived of as an academic hypothesis in the 1960s by academic psychiatrists, but it was only in the 1990s and 2000s that the idea became widely spread to the public through advertising by drug companies. A famous commercial
Who remembers
showed a sad
this
blonde
one?
with low serotonin in its head that was made happy again when Zoloft was given to it and raised its serotonin levels. Drug companies have been incredibly effective at communicating this idea to the point it has entered popular discourse and taken on a life of its own, with people on social media talking about low serotonin days. The media has wholeheartedly embraced this explanation for depression.
And I mean, that goes with any kind of, just messaging that you get over and over and over and over and over again. You've seen that little bouncing ball Zoloft commercial, and it's not the only one. And like they were saying, low serotonin days, if that's becoming part of the vernacular of people just talking about having a bad day, then it's no wonder. It's no wonder that the first thing they do is go to grab the bottle. This is not going to fix you. This is not going to fix you.
Of course, if you believe that depression is caused by low serotonin, then it seems perfectly sensible to take a drug that increases serotonin, as the SSRIs do in the short term.
The same way that if you feel like getting off of heroin is going to make you sick, it's going to not make you sick. Exactly.
Just as if someone with diabetes was told they lacked enough insulin in their body, of course they would be happy to take insulin. So this explanation has served the objectives of these companies well, because it makes their products seem natural, sensible, and safe.
Which they're not.
It turns out that this entire explanation was mostly a marketing lie. The hypothesis put forward by psychiatrists 50 years ago has not been borne out by subsequent research. Most psychiatrists now say that they had long ago given up this idea and that no informed psychiatrist would say such a thing.
No informed psychiatrist would say such a thing. Yet, we have 43 million people taking these every single day.
We recently published a large study looking at all the evidence linking serotonin and depression. Whether you look in cerebrospinal fluids, blood, scan people's brains, or look at their brains after they have died, or look at their serotonin genes, or even deprive them of serotonin by changing their diet, there is no evidence linking low serotonin level or activity with depression. Our paper dispelling this myth was widely covered in the media because this was news to most of the public who had been led to believe this.
Yeah, that is news. So what happened? Why, if that was big news, why are we still all like, yay, yay, rah, rah, antidepressants?
So, if there's no convincing evidence that depression is caused by low serotonin, then antidepressants can't be reversing this underlying chemical cause of depression. They can't be said to be acting in the same way.
They don't work like that.
There's now a whole range of other theories about what antidepressants might do, acting on inflammation, causing the growth of new neurons, etc. None of them proven in humans. Most derive from work in animals.
So now, because they have found that these things don't actually do what they say they're going to do, in I would say most cases, is that fair? They're doing an ad hoc, dogmatic, confirmation bias type of approach. They're saying, okay, well, a lot of people like these, and they sell really well. So we got to figure out how we can sell them as something that works. Because what we've been doing has worked, but people are figuring out maybe we're lying.
So if there's no proof that they fix an underlying chemical problem, then what could they be doing?
Lying.
There's another way of thinking about what psychiatric drugs do, particularly antidepressants, and that is what Professor Moncrief calls the drug-centered model. An example would be, we know that alcohol is very effective for social anxiety. If you drink alcohol, it will make you feel calm. It reduces anxiety. It will
just in case you couldn't put two and two together, this is exactly the same argument I was just making about heroin.
Make you feel more at ease in social situations, whether you have a social anxiety disorder or not. We don't think that alcohol is reversing the underlying cause of social anxiety disorder, or that social anxiety disorder is caused by an alcohol deficiency. We know that alcohol is a drug that acts on the brain, and causes certain changes to our emotions and thoughts that are superimposed on top of whatever anxiety you have underneath.
And now we're seeing that, much like alcohol or heroin, unlike antibiotics, antidepressants seem to be closer to the former category of drugs and alcohol than actual medicine.
And when the drug wears off, the anxiety will come back.
Oh,
Some people have suggested that this may be a more appropriate way to think about what psychiatric drugs are doing.
Everyone, all of my pot smokers out there know exactly what a tolerance break will do for you.
So what do antidepressants actually do to our thoughts and feelings if you look at them through this lens? There are a wide variety of different compounds that are called antidepressants, and they have differing effects. Some of them are a bit energizing, some are a bit sedating. Many of them cause emotional numbing. That's one of the most common effects that people will report when they're asked. In surveys of people on antidepressants, between 50 and 70% will report numbed emotions.
This is the number one reason why I would not go on SSRIs. I suffer from generalized anxiety disorder. It basically just means I'm a little bit too high strung all the time. So I got my medicine here, and it keeps me normal. What it doesn't do is this. Now, the doctors wanted to put me on the SSRIs that they're talking about. And I said, no. I said, I'm not doing that. Now, okay, I realized that in my time abusing drugs, that benzodiazepines didn't have that type of effect on me. So I was able to say that, no, I think this is a better way to go, as long as I remain responsible, which I have been for the last 5+ years. But in the same way that you can abuse, Xanax or anything like that, you may not need to be abusing in this traditional sense these SSRIs in order to completely F up your lived experience.
Sometimes people claim that this is because of the depression itself, but a recent study found that even in healthy volunteers without any depression, they cause blunting of emotions. This emotional numbing has also been linked to the genital numbing often experienced by people on antidepressants. In fact, if you crush up many antidepressants and swish them around your mouth with some water, they will numb your mouth.
I've heard of Coke dick, but I've never heard of SSRI dick.
Numbing will reduce negative emotions.
Facts.
You can see why some people might welcome that. If they're in the depths of despair, if they're beside themselves with anxiety.
But does that help the underlying issue?
The numbing effects might give them a reprieve from those symptoms. But antidepressants are not so targeted as just to affect negative emotions.
That's so sad. Look at, this guy, it's sad that people are going through life numb because they can't deal with reality. And whether that's because they are weak or because reality is horrible or a combination of both, this is not a good answer. This is not a good answer. And I may have a degree in psychology, but I'm far from a doctor. I'm far from a psychiatrist. I'm far from anybody with authority on this. But it's very clear that this isn't helping. So why do we continue to do it?
They affect all emotions, including ones we enjoy. So there might be unforeseen consequences of such an approach. In the long term, numbing might affect relationships, quality of life, and the ability to experience positive emotions. So how effective are antidepressants? This has been explored in hundreds of randomized controlled trials. Study after study finds it very difficult to distinguish between antidepressants and placebo.
Hard to find a difference between a mind-altering drug and a sugar pill. You don't need to be a doctor to understand what that means.
There have been hundreds of studies conducted comparing antidepressants to sugar pills over about 8 weeks. And in these studies, everybody gets better over 8 weeks, whether they're given an antidepressant or a sugar pill. We know that depression tends to get better over time. When people turn up to their doctor's offices, they're often at the worst point in their lives. Over time, people tend to return to average. That's called regression to the mean. It applies to nausea, headache, and to mood like depression.
As well as gender dysphoria. Imagine that. Imagine that. That just letting things play out, using things like mindfulness, talk therapy, changing the way that you live, the things that you eat, all of these things, whether it's depression or anything else, can kickstart a habit and bring momentum to a process that will improve your life without drugs. Again, some people will need these drugs, and that's fine. Nobody's saying that you're a bad person if you need to be on antidepressants. What's being said is, hold up, maybe you don't need to become a lifelong customer of Big Pharma. And I'm covering it with both bases, whether it's depression or anything else. This needs to be understood. That just popping a pill is not always the answer. And sometimes, oftentimes, will make things worse. And if it doesn't make it worse, it could bring up a whole host of other issues. So definitely go check out After School, who brought us this video, and check out the rest of what Dr. Horwitz has to say. But I just want to share with you guys that the studies, the numbers, the science around all of this is quite clear. Or rather, is not very clear. Not nearly as clear as they make it seem. So whether it's you or your children or your brother or your parents, if they're going through a hard time, take a step back. Make sure that when you talk to a doctor, that they are treating you as a patient and not as a customer. Thank you so much for partying with my co-host Morty and myself, Lutch, aka the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Let me know what you thought down below, guys. Check me live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and please hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a video. I will see you guys tomorrow. Until then, we are out of here. Peace.